When I look at We Who Wrestle with God as the more mature next step in the 12 rules of life
It's sort of a return to maps of meaning.
Interesting.
Hopefully
so you
it
don't
won't be.
feel that it's the successor to 12 rules of life?
It is in the way that you just described.
Because I think,
suppose it's a hybrid. See, maps of meaning was so difficult. It took me 30 years to unpack it to the point where I could make it straightforwardly comprehensible, especially in writing, but even in lecturing. Right? I unpacked it really over 30 years. And then I got good enough at that so I could write a book that was accessible. And then this book is, I hope it retains its accessibility, but it's a hydrogen bomb, this book. Really.
I mean, look, I haven't read it yet, but I'm gonna plant a flag here and say this is how I think your books go. Maps of Meaning, which is how I found you, helped me understand why.
Why were you motivated to plow through that?
Because I'm a filmmaker at my core.
So the story part.
Yes. And so I took away from that, this is why these structures, these characters, these relationships, this is why they resonate with the human animal.
Yes, right.
12 rules for life were, hey, I see you suffering. I see nobody's talking to you. Let me give you some simple rules that will really help you out. Then you go on your own cross-carrying journey, coma, illness, crazy town, and you come back with the Deathly Hallows version of, now I'm going to give you the mythology, and I'm going to tell you exactly what you wrestle with to learn what spirit not only lives inside you currently, what spirit should live inside of you. All of the human experience has already been thought through. I can't give it to you in a bunch of simple packages of the rules for life because those will become dead wood fast. I've got to get you into the thing. There's a reason you titled this book, We Who Wrestle with God, and not What You Can Learn from God. That would have been a title more people would have understood, but there's obviously something to this idea of wrestling with living ideas, making it personal, figuring out what your relationship is with this stuff.
When Jacob is wrestling with God, that's worship. That's true worship. That's why he's awarded the name Israel. He's the leader of the chosen people because he wrestles with God. So that's manna for the suffering, because it means that if you're genuinely suffering, then God's there in your grasp, right there with you. That's a good way of thinking about it. In the wrestling, Socrates was a wrestler, literally, right? And he was a very powerfully built person. He wrestled before he was a philosopher. It's the same thing. And the thing is about the chosen people, Israel, everyone wrestles with God. Now, the question is, in what spirit should you wrestle with God? And I would say, remember who you're wrestling with. That's what God tells Job when he reminds him that, God was there at the beginning of time, defeating Leviathan, fashioning the world. Remember who you're wrestling with. Have a little humility, or a lot, plenty, enough to strip you of your dead wood. Right. And if you're all dead wood, then the fire of God looks like hell.
Can I get you to read something that you said? These are your words, verbatim. This is from your ARC speech. This was when I felt like, okay, I actually really understand what he's doing now. It starts there with the muscle emojis and just goes to the bottom.
You want me to read it out loud?
Yeah, I think it's better in your voice because this, for everybody listening, this is part of the speech he gave at the ARC conference.
We're so foolish. We regard those propositions, religious propositions, as something approximating primitive superstitions, when in fact they're the most brilliant intuitions into the fundamental structure of reality that have ever been offered. We predicated our civilization on those presuppositions. And look at it. It's not so bad. We've brought wealth and plenty to billions of people around the world. We've been struggling uphill properly. And if we were wise and faithful and courageous and responsible, we could continue to spread that to everyone. We could eradicate absolute poverty. We could bring about a time of abundance and opportunity for everyone. And we'll do that. We can do that if we hoist the world on our individual shoulders and operate collectively in this harmonious manner and continue the struggle uphill toward the city of God. And that's the truth. It's the truth. It's not some superstition. It's not some primitive defense against death anxiety. It's not the opiate of the people. It's the call to divine responsibility. And to the degree that each of us acted it out in the confines of our own life, we do what I suggested at the beginning of this conference, which is tilt the world toward heaven and away from hell. Yeah, that's
all right. Amazing. It hit me very hard when I first heard it. I don't believe in God. How do I come to
what does Pajot say
making
about
this
that
useful?
when people say that? He says, I don't believe in the same God you don't believe in. Do you think, are you struggling to find your way?
Yes.
Is it an honest struggle?
Yes.
That's the belief. It's not a statement. Religious belief is not a statement about facts. It's not a scientific theory. This is why the Enlightenment is done. That was wrong. That isn't what it is. It's a struggle. It's the moral struggle. Or you could say, maybe more clearly, see, you say you don't believe, but what you mean is you can't reconcile your conceptions with your intuitions, really. And that is the modern predicament, because do you believe that what happened in Auschwitz was wrong?
Yes.
Okay, well then, you've established one pole of the belief in divinity. You've just established the malevolent pole. And that means the benevolent pole is ill conceptualized, still implicit. That's it, still implicit. That's what God is. That's what God is in the belly of the whale, is implicit still, implicit. But that doesn't mean it's not there. Called or not called, God is there. That was Carl Jung, the carving over the castle he built with his own two hands. It's there. You just don't know it. But you know to some degree because you're struggling, and you're struggling away from Auschwitz, let's say. That's good. Great. The person running away from hell is also running towards heaven. Now, maybe your pathway would be a little straighter if you knew a little bit more about heaven, but away is something. Out of hell is something. Out of hell towards what? There's the next question, I suppose. Out of hell towards what? Towards what? Toward a neutral normality, or upward, away from hell, up Jacob's ladder towards the highest possible heights. That's the dwelling place of the eternally uniting spirit. That's a good way of thinking about it. That's Jacob's ladder. And where does it end? I don't know if it does end. It disappears into the heights. And what's at the top? Something that recedes when you approach it.
I come at everything from a very materialist standpoint.
Not everything.
I think everything.
Not the evil. Not your realization of the reality of evil.
To me, that there's no incongruence there. That's just a nature of biology.
I didn't say there was necessarily an incongruence.
Interesting. So for me, that's the same. I come at that, just humans are algorithms, and you have algorithms that could lead you to evil. I get why in certain circumstances in a truly amoral universe where
humans are the creators of algorithms as well.
Yeah, sort of.
Sort of. That's right.
Biology is at play, but females select who they sleep with, and that has huge implications. We all get to invite ideas into our world. So for sure.
Well, there's an order. It's like, I think one of the ways of thinking about it is that it's the same as the dynamic between musical knowledge and musical production in composers. Like the composers are adhering to a set of guidelines, you would say. They're operating in accordance with a certain order, but they can produce an literally endless proliferation of forms. And human beings are both of those things. They're They're the order that gives rise to what is new and alive, but they're also the thing that is alive. They're both at the same time. That's the hero in relationship to the father of the king. That's Osiris in relationship to Horus. Or that's Horus, the Egyptian god, in relationship to Osiris. We're both. That's partly why there's a Trinitarian view in Christianity. So, because the Father is like a structure. That's a way of thinking about it. And the Son is the incarnation of that structure. And the Spirit is the intermediary between the two. It's something like that.
I'm trying to get people to understand that they're having a biological experience because I want them to be able to predict the outcome of their actions by understanding the nature of their mind and the minds of the people they're interacting with. I have a feeling you're doing exactly the same thing through a different form of encapsulated wisdom, that wisdom being the biblical corpus.
Mm-hmm.
How right does that feel?
Well, the monotheistic hypothesis is that everything meets. So I don't have any problem with the evolutionary biologists, for example. Well, once we sort out our theological presuppositions and our biological presuppositions, they'll be the same thing.
Yes.
Oh, yes. You can see that convergence is already happening. That's already happening in many, many ways. There's a tremendous concordance, I would say, between the ethos that's laid out in the biblical writings and the what would you say, the analysis of reciprocal altruism. So, and Brett Weinstein is moving rapidly down that road, for example, in his conceptualization of the spirit that organizes human individuals and societies. So,
do you think what they're discovering is that the narrative structure and the just time-tested way that these stories have been passed on into our generation prove that that's just the best encapsulation of that wisdom in a way that people can use in their own lives?
Yeah, well, sure. You could almost think about that as by definition. I mean, the stories in the biblical corpus are the ones that burn themselves into our imagination and memories. Well, why? Well, because they have a concordance with that structure. The stories, this is where Dawkins would have gone with the idea of meme if he would have pushed it eventually. The memes that best match themselves to the structure of our psyche are the ones we conserved.
Yes.
Obviously. How could it possibly be any different? How could it possibly be any different than that? Obviously, that's the case.
That obviously assumes a base assumption that you will react the most strongly to the things that are most true. If you don't have that base assumption, that won't be obvious to you. You'd be like, it's not real, therefore it's bullshit. And you will completely discredit the emotional response.
Yes.
Because if you take a Sam Harris or Richard Dawkins.
You can do that when you're confused conceptually though too, and that can block your vision. So, and that's part of what happened as a consequence of the Enlightenment. We didn't understand what we were doing, and we didn't understand the relationship between what we were doing and the world of facts.
But it was super useful, man.
The
Enlightenment.
Absolutely.